So now I would like to welcome up Marta Stelmaszak Rosa.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It feels absolutely fantastic to be here today and have this opportunity to talk to you. So thank you as well for having me and for the introduction. So as you know, my name is Marta. I'm an assistant professor of information systems and a Daimler Truck professor of analytics. And I'll tell you a little bit more what that means in a minute. But first, I want to invite you today on a journey, to go on a journey with me, on a journey of intelligence from human all the way through artificial intelligence. So if you'd like, just take a leap of faith and join me, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this ride today. The journey starts with a story, and I hope that you won't mind me sharing a little bit of my personal background. It's important for the story. When I was a little girl, my mom asked me, what is that I wanted to do when I grow up? And to give you a little bit of background, I'm originally from Eastern Europe. So at that time, let's say the political circumstances were slightly inhibiting and limiting. My family background was humble. So it was a loaded question for my mom to ask. And the little me, without thinking a lot, replied, "Mom, I want to study." So that put my mom in a bit of a difficult situation. And she thought about it a little, and she said, well, you can study for some time. You can go to high school. If you do well, maybe you can even go to a university. But at some point, you'll have to find a real job. And well, today I can say to my mom that I think I lived my life to prove her wrong, because I made it. My job as a professor is to study. So I managed to achieve that. And what I study is really what people and technologies can do together. So in my field, in information systems, we look at what happens when we bring together people and digital technologies. And my research concerns two broad areas. One of them is data about people that I can tell you about at some other opportunity, or we can talk about in a break later. What I want to focus on today is the other area that I work in, which is human and AI collaboration. And here comes another story, because when I was a little girl, I was also told that girls can't do IT. So this bit is for you, Dad. I made it as well, right? Yay. So the journey that I want to take you on starts with a bit of a reflection. And I would like you to think about it now, as I will be thinking about it too. When did you first become aware of that thing called intelligence? And by aware, I mean, when did you consciously think that there is that thing known as intelligence that's out there, and that you would like to perhaps know more about it? For me, the story goes like this. I was very dedicated to proving both of my parents wrong, as it turns out, so I studied a lot, and I studied really hard, and I ended up getting to a really, really, really good university abroad. And in the first lecture, I sat there, a first-generation student from a foreign country, and it occurred to me that all of these people around me were just thinking and approaching all the problems in lectures in a very different way, in the way that was very new to me. They were asking questions that I never even knew were possible to ask. They were challenging. They were speaking up to professors, right? It was a very big thing and a very big difference and a very big change for me. And that's when I realized that there were some qualities and there were some aspects of thinking and intelligence, and it was the first time when I noticed it as something that was outside of me, and I started reflecting on it. So of course, by now you probably know that I am an overachiever, so I decided that I had to learn intelligence, and I had to know absolutely everything there is to know about it, so I can match up and catch up to everybody around me. And that started my fascination with intelligence. And that really put me on that course to, well, finishing that degree, then going and getting a PhD, then becoming a professor. And it all goes back to that need for me to try to understand that question of intelligence. And of course, I have my definition, but I'm going to ask you right now to participate in a research study for me. So, you know, once a professor, always a professor, and I can't prejudice the results, so I can't tell you my definition of intelligence, because I want you to think about that for yourselves, okay? So, of course, I'm joking. This is, don't ask the Institutional Review Board at PSU. This is not an official research project. This is just something for us to explore together today. So what I would like you to do is to take your devices and go to that website, menti.com, insert the code you can see in here, think about what is intelligence. And now, no cheating, no Googling. I want to know what it means for you. What is intelligence for you? And as you have noticed, I'm telling you, you can use your devices. So things have changed a little in academia. I don't know if you remember when you were back in school, we were like, no devices in the classroom. Now it's the other way around. We all want everyone to be using their own devices. So think about it. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about this question and insert your answers. We're going to put them up on the screen as well, but they are all anonymous. Okay, can we see some of the results up on the screen? Oh, we have answers coming in. Okay, great. So we have knowledge, understanding behaviors, insight, creative problem solving. Knowing that you don't know a lot and there's so much to learn. I love it. Yeah, that's exactly my motto. Thank you, whoever contributed this. Can we maybe scroll down a little to see a few more? Perfect. Self-awareness, observing behavior, curiosity around how things work, ability to think critically. I love that too. That's something that I keep on trying to teach my students as well. Being thoughtful and curious about learning new ideas. A mix of academic life knowledge paired with moral insights. I love that. Now I feel like arranging follow-up interviews with all of you so that I can ask more questions. See, the researcher in me is really excited about all of these answers. Understanding, logic, brain, the ability to recognize patterns, draw conclusions. That's fantastic, you all. I'm loving all of these answers. So I'm already thinking about a study when I go home. I'm going to run some NLP algorithms to analyze these answers. Thank you so much for contributing all of this. So it's this diversity of our comments in here is great, right? But you can also imagine how for someone like me, this causes some problems. So think about the predicament that I find myself in here. How can I study something that has so many definitions? And this is also something, if we can go back to this slide, this is also something that is a problem in general in research. There are so many different definitions of intelligence that it's very difficult to grasp it as a concept. So for someone like me who tries to understand how to make it artificial, that obviously poses a challenge, because what is that we're trying to make artificial? And I've spent more than a decade now reading research in philosophy of mind, cognitive science, psychology, artificial intelligence, try to really put my finger on what is that intelligence, what is it in our heads that we're trying to make artificial. And I put some examples of the frameworks that are out there in here. just to illustrate that it's so difficult for us to really define and understand what is that we're trying to make artificial. So today I want to talk a little about research that I'm doing with a colleague back in the UK. And the way we try to tackle this problem of intelligence is by looking at this framework of cognitive abilities. That is the Cattell-Horn-Carroll framework that really tries to break down what intelligence is into different kinds of cognitive abilities that we apply for different tasks as humans. And now, of course, this is way too detailed and way too small also for you to see, a little bit on purpose, right? Because I don't want you to get too distracted by the detail in here. The framework is something that we use to understand what are the different categories of the tasks that we do as humans that we call intelligence. So for example, one of the elements in here that we have in here is visual processing. So when we see things like letters written on a piece of paper, we are able to process them. As humans, that's part of intelligence. But we also have general memory, the ability to remember facts, right, as part of intelligence. We have fluid intelligence, so our ability to reason also as something that forms part of this idea of intelligence. So in our research, we use this framework to look at what is that we as humans do and what is that we ask AI to do and which cognitive abilities we task AI with. So in my field, and I guess judging or based on previous presentations, that extends also to practice and to other areas. There are two main narratives when it comes to understanding how AI can influence these cognitive abilities. So the first story is the story of automation. And in here we have technologies such as optical character recognition or natural language processing that are perhaps intended to fill that function, that cognitive ability of visual processing. So in here, we have that idea of automating something that we used to do as humans, right? We had to read handwriting in order to decipher it. And now we don't need to do this anymore because we have sophisticated algorithms that do that for you. So this idea of automating is something that for decades has really captured, I don't want to say imagination, more like the fears of a lot of people, that AI is coming after our jobs and that it's going to replace us. And that, thankfully for us, has proven not to be that much of the case. And that's where we entered the idea of augmenting human capabilities. And now we talk much more about augmentation with technologies. For example, voice assistants, right, that are very often in here to replace our general memory. So I can just ask, well, hey Siri, who was the first president of the United States? And surely,
here's what I found.
I don't need to remember that, right? Which comes in handy since I've only lived in the US for the past 2 years, so I don't have all my facts there yet. So I really love my Siri here. So that is the idea of augmentation, right? So I can come across as a perfectly coherent human being with all that knowledge that is expected of me because I have that little bit of AI helping me here. But when we were doing our research with my colleague, we became, I don't want to say suspicious, but as researchers, we often feel like maybe there is something bigger in this story. Maybe automation and augmentation are not the only two possibilities. So we reviewed hundreds and hundreds of academic articles that are written on artificial intelligence and its relationship with humans, because we wanted to understand what is that's actually happening to these cognitive abilities. Now, what also helped us quite a lot with our research is the emergence of ChatGPT. And I was really glad that it was mentioned earlier today because it's a key example to my presentation. So ChatGPT is a tool that you can chat with in human language, so you can write your questions, and you're going to get a nicely generated response based on whatever question you ask. So of course, in my world as a professor, right when ChatGPT came out, a lot of my friends were a little bit worried, and they were saying, hey, can't your students just ask ChatGPT to write their essays and submit this? Aren't you worried about plagiarism? And then I said, well, ChatGPT was able to generate a perfect syllabus for my class and outline slides, so I'm not sure I should be really worried about students and plagiarism in here, right? Because obviously there is something, perhaps a bigger challenge or a bigger problem in here. So I wanted to ask, who in the audience has heard about ChatGPT? Raise your hand. Okay, good. And who of you have used it? Have you played around with it? Excellent. Okay, great. So I wanted to say that if you haven't used it yet, try it out tomorrow, because it can do really, really great things. For example, you can tell ChatGPT, you're Eminem, write a song about cats. And I'm telling you, you need to Google it later because the examples are hilarious. Actually, in fact, let's do it. Can we play that video, please?
Meow, meow, meow. They're the kings of the house. They run the show. They don't need a spouse. They're the best pets that have. Feel afraid. Eminem loves cats another very day. They may drive us crazy with their constant meow, but we can't stay mad. There's still our boys with a single purr.
So I thought that we all needed to see some cats today in the afternoon, so there you go. Well, obviously, that's clearly impending doom for me as professor, right? Because if it can do this, it can do anything. But also, perhaps when we look at tools like ChatGPT, it can be a bit scary for, the younger me, the perhaps slightly naive me who wanted to learn intelligence, who wanted to become a better thinker. If there are tools like this, what does that mean for me, and what does that mean for you if you're thinking about how you can contribute to the world and how you can be intelligent, how you can be a thinker? So with a more serious example, I have a friend back in London who works at a biomedical institute, and that friend back in January was really scared about ChatGPT and what it was going to do to some of the research that they're doing at this institute. So we're talking a little about this and how that friend can manage it. And I checked back with that friend a couple of days ago, telling them about my presentation here in this conference. So I asked, well, how is it going? Are you still worried about ChatGPT? So apparently my friend is now thinking of making a career change and starting a course teaching scientists like them how to use ChatGPT to improve their work. And they were asking me, what tips do you have? How do I start this kind of professor thing going, right? So something interesting is happening in there, right? Despite tools like this that can replace singers, songwriters, and perhaps professors, there's still space and scope for things that humans can do. And a good example in here, I found an article some time ago, is this idea of prompt engineering. And it's a new emerging, that's what I wanted to say, job that's all about creating the right kind of question to ask ChatGPT so that it gives you the right kind of answer. And I experimented with it a couple of days ago as well. Inspired by the Eminem example, I wanted ChatGPT to create a Taylor Swift song about artificial intelligence, but it didn't sound quite like Taylor Swift. So I was like, okay, be more like Taylor Swift. So it ended up having some unfortunate relationship breakups with artificial intelligence mixed in there, right? So that is an example of a new kind of ability that's emerging on top of a tool like ChatGPT. So I have another question that I wanted to ask you to think about. And I would like you to imagine that you had ChatGPT to help you do your job. No matter what you do, for me, it's thinking, I'm a professor and I'm working in this job. I would like you to take some time to reflect on, even if you had a tool like this, and I was glad to see that most of you tried it out, maybe you do even already use it in your job. What is that you still do as a human? So go to the same website. There is a different code this time. Think a little about what is that you still do. Great, let's see some answers. Generate ideas, cry, okay. Whoever answered that, talk to me later. Now I feel like my teaching responsibility, we need to talk about it so I can convince you there is hope. Tool to improve efficiency, yes. So you still do things just more efficiently. Identify the problems that need to be solved. Build trust and relationships with customers. Yes, try asking ChatGPT to do this. Relationship management. Drive my vehicle, yeah. Crafting the perfect job description, that's right. Drive strategy and implementation. You have to fix your code. Solve problems using the tool, yeah. Decision making. Be in meetings, right? Wouldn't it be convenient just to send ChatGPT to a meeting instead, huh? Yeah. Write the initial code. Decide what needs to be done, right? I relate to some of these so much as a professor, because one could say, of course, I could put ChatGPT in charge of teaching my students, but I still need to decide what they need to learn, right? Laugh, I love that. Logical thinking, Review and correct results, provide context. Oh, you can relax, yeah. I like that too. Connect with people. Cooking, I like that. Yeah, again, try asking ChatGPT to do that for you. Great, thank you so much for your responses. As I said earlier, I'm already thinking, what is the kind of research that I could do with this? So if you hear from me asking, if I can please analyze your responses, say yes, right? As researchers, we always need a lot of data and a lot of inputs. So thank you so much for that. And if we can go back to slides. So this brings me to a central thesis that I wanted to ask you to entertain for me, and something that really came out of our research really strongly. And I think that you may be thinking along the same lines. And what we found in our research is this idea that with AI, our human intelligence sometimes may be automated, sometimes may be augmented, but most of the time it's redistributed. So it's moved around into different parts of the tasks that we do, or into different places of organizations. And in our research, we identified 4 configurations of this redistribution, and I wanted to spend some time talking about them to you. So the first one is concurrent human intelligence. So the idea that an intelligent technology can be ChatGPT, can be another type of artificial intelligence, substitutes for another technology, but it still needs these human cognitive abilities. So for AI to work, we need that human fluid intelligence. We have a tool, but we still need our own thinking in order for this tool to replace some of the more fundamental or some of the more basic tools in here, right? So if I was to think about an example, I can have a voice assistant like Siri, but it still needs it exists out there, but it still needs not only my voice, but also my question. So that fluid intelligence, that ability to reason, come up with a question is still needed there to replace something like a database system where I could look up who the first president of the United States was. So that my human fluid intelligence in here is essential for that. The second configuration we found is prior human intelligence. And that, in here, ChatGPT is a very good example. I need to first think of a good prompt before I can use AI so that it can replace that human fluid intelligence, inductive thinking, quantitative reasoning, terms from that theoretical framework I presented earlier. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not scared that my students are going to go out and use ChatGPT, because in the classes where I teach, what matters to me is that they know what kind of a question to ask, because that is a much bigger and much more important skill for them to learn, rather than necessarily creating the answer. Of course, I still would prefer, if they do use ChatGPT, for them to critically analyze the outputs and edit them, but it's the ability to ask the right kind of a question that really matters in that situation. The third configuration we came up with, or we observed, is that idea of parallel human intelligence. So yes, we do have an AI system, but for it to replace our cognitive abilities in one area, it needs human intelligence and going on and happening at the same time for it to work and for it to take an effect. And this is something that we see not so much in individual tasks, but I think it will come there as well. But we see it at the level of organizations. So some of you in here, as we were talking earlier, are considering or are implementing artificial intelligence systems, for example, to be able to reduce some of the work that now is done by humans. But in order for this to work, there have to be other humans who think about these implementations. And they have to be the AI creators, they have to be the developers working at the same time for this redistribution to happen. And finally, our fourth configuration is this posterior human intelligence. So yes, we have that pattern where an intelligent technology, some form of an AI, substitutes for one type of human cognitive ability, but another type of ability is needed to work with the outputs of the technology. So for example, going back to ChatGPT and Eminem, yes, of course, Eminem's creative, I can't believe I'm talking about Eminem as a information systems professor, but that's the reality, right? Makes for a good example. We can replace that person's ability to create music, to create lyrics with an AI, but we still need someone on the other end to create a funny YouTube video out of it, right? We need someone to give the voice. We need someone to put the cats in there. So we need an interpreter for that music to come out on the other end. And a really good example of that is, again, going back to my Taylor Swift, playing around with Taylor Swift. After I had the lyrics for that song, I asked ChatGPT, okay, now add chords so it can actually be played. And then I asked my husband, who is playing the keyboard, to play it. And I was like, that sounds way too cheerful for Taylor Swift. So make it a little sadder. Okay, so ChatGPT changed some of the chords. And it still needed someone, a person, to work with these outputs, right? And of course, I'm giving funny examples, lighthearted examples here, but I hope that you can follow that reasoning and see how it applies to your own work and your situations and your particular circumstances in here. So with these 4 configurations, this takes me to what I think is really important and what I think is our mission in here. If we look at how intelligence is neither automated nor augmented, but rather redistributed, I am hopeful about the future, but I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do. And here comes the homework for you, right? So once a professor, always a professor, so start taking notes. It's due in a couple of weeks' time. The key for us, the key mission, is to really start thinking for ourselves, where is that our human intelligence adds value? Where is that we as individuals, when these tools become more and more widespread, where is that we add that little bit that cannot be automated, cannot be augmented, and where is that we can put it within these configurations? Perhaps there is an element of your work that is essential before a tool is implemented. Perhaps there is an element of your work that you need to be doing as a person at the same time as that tool is working. Maybe there is a configuration in your tasks, in your organizations, where you can add, or your inputs are essential after a tool has been put to use. Now, this also means some changes for organizations. So if you're in a position where you're managing how others work, the challenge for you is to think about how tasks and roles should be redesigned and how job or work duties have to be reconsidered when thinking about that future where AI tools are going to be implemented. Where is that you really need your humans? Do you need them before? Do you need at the same time? Do you need after? How to configure these new, how to set up these new configurations where you have these tools in place. But also in general, a bigger question also for researchers like me is how we can design these redistributive human AI systems so that we escape that thinking that it's either automation or just slightly, how should I put it, less formal augmentation, but rather how can we create by design systems where we know where humans and human strengths are really key, and what are the parts that AI can take over. And I like doing that exercise for myself as a professor, also to keep me sane and knowing that I won't be replaced by an AI-generated avatar with suggestions of classes and outlines of my lectures. And I like thinking about that and considering where is that my inputs are really necessary. And I think that this is an excellent exercise for all of us to do in preparation for that future. And that's also another reason why now, even more than that over a decade ago, I am convinced that we need to study and learn intelligence and learn where our strengths are as human thinkers. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave you with this thought, again, as homework, inviting you to analyze your own jobs and your career paths and think about the strengths of your human intelligence in the near future where AI comes, and how you can ensure that your intelligence can be redistributed in the best possible way. And I'm going to open it up for questions now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really interesting. But in terms of higher education, I've been having this debate in our household I've got a son that has been, he's an international baccalaureate program and IB in high school, and they had made a statement about it's okay to use ChatGPT as long as you are able to do the edits, make sure that like as you had proposed. However, I have a fundamental issue with this, because if higher education is, nowadays there's debates about vocational learning and how important it is to be able to get a job where you've got the skills, and so you see Google certificates, all this stuff, but critical thinking skills are so important that I don't know if you've heard the expression, the journey is the destination. So while we are very amused by these large language models about the results of LLMs, the results of stable diffusion, and the potential and the beauty that that it results in, a student having to develop a 5-paragraph essay, they've got to organize their thoughts, they've got to understand the problems, develop a thesis. That whole process is gone with ChatGPT. So that's why, I'm wondering, being in higher education, what is what is being discussed in terms of, what are the limits, and what are we going to do with LLMs and stable diffusion as an example? Sorry that was long, but.
It was perfect. Thank you so much. That's a great question, and definitely something that I can tell you academic Twitter is talking about it all the time, because we're trying to figure it out. And one of the people who sort of tried to tackle this question on Twitter said that if your students are able to use ChatGPT to write an essay, it means that perhaps you need to reconsider your essay question. And I think that this really speaks to, it's something, as a professor, I probably shouldn't be saying, because it requires me to work harder. Because maybe we need to think of better essay prompts for our students, where going to ChatGPT and asking to produce the output is no longer enough. So maybe we need to think of creating these essay-type questions in ways that are challenging, that are more challenging, and in ways that develop critical and analytical thinking beyond what can be done with ChatGPT. So that's something that I'm really consciously thinking about in my own work. How can I challenge my students more so that ChatGPT is not enough? Because that is exactly what we need them to do as future professionals. And of course, as I said, it means more work for us as professors. We need to be more creative. Maybe we need to change some of the essays we've been using for years, or some of the questions, even some of the materials. But I think that's where we can really contribute, and where we can really be a step ahead. Yeah, so that would be my answer to this. So I think there's a challenge on educators in terms of what kind of essays we want our students to write. Thank you again for a great question.
Hello, thank you for speaking. I have questions about ChatGPT and the implications on basically copyright law and plagiarism, right? It's collecting data from all kinds of different sources without ever citing where they're coming from, without ever giving credit. And as somebody who works in a scientific field, we credit the people that contribute to our papers. but GTP doesn't really do that. What kind of implications can we see in the future about the changes that are going to happen to copyright law and intellectual property around harvesting people's data when they aren't getting credit for it?
Another great question, thank you. So the question is, how do we make sure that when ChatGPT creates an answer, inevitably taking from other people and other sources, because that's how it works, without attributing them? What does that mean for copyright and for plagiarism? And that's another reason why, for example, ChatGPT would not be able to write an academic paper for me. I mean, hopefully for other reasons as well, but I would not be able to trace where these ideas came from, and that is something that is fundamental in my work, to attribute to others their ideas. I think that also a challenge in here, and something that is worth reflecting on for our students, is that this is another limitation. So some of the essays that my students have to write need to indicate sources, and if they are unable to do so because of the way how ChatGPT works, it's also, as a tool, perhaps somewhat useless for them, because they cannot have that traceability. And the other thing that I wanted to add is, I found out a couple of weeks ago that there is actually a computer science student here in the US who developed a tool for professors so that you can check if the essay has been generated by ChatGPT or not. So there are ways to check against that if you have no ChatGPT use policy. But in general, that question about what it means for plagiarism and what it means for attribution in scientific work is a very big one, and something that is important to reflect on. One more anecdote is, I recently received an update from one of the journals that I published my work in, that said that if you're using ChatGPT to help you with your research or to help you write your paper, you need to now explicitly acknowledge it. And that's in response to some things that excite researchers. There has been a first paper that had ChatGPT as a co-author officially listed. It went through the scientific review process, and no one, because it's a blind process, no one knew that it was ChatGPT that was one of the co-authors. And I think as academia, we're not sure we want that. And that's why we're implementing these policies. But again, a very big and important question for us to think about.
Thanks. And as AI starts to integrate other people's answers, like for ChatGPT, and people are going to be supplying their own data, do you think that the machine learning has taken into account incorrect answers or basically dirty data, either maliciously or unintentionally? Do you think it's still going to be a reliable source of information?
Again, a great question, and I wish I had the answer to that. I think that we're facing similar problems with ChatGPT, AI, ML, or without it. Because even if we didn't have any of these tools, the sad truth is that there are people out there who are either maliciously or not spreading misinformation as well. So I think that this, of course, can be done perhaps at a bigger scale with tools like this. And I don't want to get too philosophical here, but perhaps it's a reflection of who we are as humanity, right? And it's just giving a new tool and a new platform for some of the things that were happening before that as well. Yeah, so that would be my answer to that.
Thank you so much for speaking. I really appreciate, really appreciate hearing from you, especially as a professor here locally. I had another hard one. Yeah, so earlier we were talking about envisioning a world in which technology can sort of simply make our lives a bit easier by taking up tasks that we, that are tedious, that we as humans don't necessarily want to take up. And my question is sort of around how this concept benefits farmers, how it benefits peasants even, and how it benefits caregivers, how does this concept benefit the majority of women around the world, particularly women in the global south, many of whom live in a state of landlessness under exploitative, patriarchal, and even feudal conditions still to this day. The majority of women in the world do live in conditions like this, and so how does AI address their root problems and basic needs? How can AI be used in a pro-people fashion to lift women up around the world? It's kind of a hard one, but I pose it to sort of challenge everybody in this room to think about how we can use our intelligence, our innovation, especially the women in this room, when we are offered a seat at this table, to use our intelligence in this way to create a world where all women around the world can advance together rather than taking advantage of our sisters in the global south to propel ourselves into this bright future that we envision.
Thank you so much for this great comment and this provocative question. I think it's absolutely paramount for us to think about it. And I think that this, for me, raises that aspect that perhaps we don't always want to look at. The fact that, yes, the majority of these tools are used in certain parts of the world, while other parts of the world are on fire. And it's something that we need to reckon with and think of ways in which we can readdress this, this balance. So I think it's absolutely important in here. And when I think about this, I'm always feeling so torn that on one hand, I can play around with ChatGPT and ask it to write Taylor Swift songs, or there's someone out there who created a funny Eminem cat video, while there are so many big problems in the world, and we're not necessarily directing our intelligence towards them. So I think that is a very big question, and perhaps a good call for us to think about as well. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for your time here, by the way. I'm going to steal one of your tactics, so trying to make it lighthearted. If you think of the beginning of Ender's Game, where everyone's on the spaceship, and Ender starts laughing because he realizes they're upside down, even though they're right side up. And thinking about what Intel was talking about with their AI, having it be repeatable, how do you discuss with your students about using the artificial intelligence tools and avoiding falling into the same think trap, where you're going to get the same answer and not be able to think about different things because the prompt is generating the same result for the same question?
Great question, and I love the Ender's Game reference, one of my favorite books. So I think that this is also one of the key reasons why I believe that we need to not shy away from tools like ChatGPT and other AI tools, but rather double down on education and teaching future professionals how to work with these tools. And I would much rather have a class where I tell my students, go and use ChatGPT, but you need to write an essay on its limitations and understand where, what are some of the challenges and warrants that limit its usefulness, what is left out, what is that cannot be done, and help them understand, for example, how not to fall into doing the same thing over and over again that narrows down the possibilities rather than seeing more and seeing beyond. So my answer to this would be creating a course or a class, and I am not going to ask ChatGPT to write a syllabus for it, on how to work with tools like this and how to keep some of these issues in check. Thank you so much again for listening, for engaging. I can't wait to look at all of your answers as well and talking to you more in the break about what you think intelligence is and what is that we still can do as humans, right? Thank you so much again.